The Galactic Council had seen many species rise and fall across the stars, but none quite like the humans. When Earth first made contact 3 cycles ago, the alien representatives had observed humanity's military demonstrations with polite interest. They watched the humans showcase their projectile weapons, their energy cannons, their sophisticated combat vehicles. The council members nodded approvingly. Here was another tool-using species that understood the necessity of technological warfare. What they failed to grasp was that humans didn't merely use weapons. They were weapons. Commander Zekai of the Veltar Empire learned this lesson the hard way, during what would later be known as the Battle of Kepler Station. The crystalline being stood 8 feet tall, his razor-sharp limbs capable of slicing through most known materials. His species had conquered 17 star systems through superior reach and cutting power. When the humans refused to surrender their mining rights on Kepler 442b, Zekai had laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Remove their weapons," he had ordered his subordinates as they boarded the human outpost. "Let us see how these soft creatures fare without their precious tools." The Veltar boarding party efficiently stripped the human defenders of their plasma rifles, sidearms, and even their utility knives. 30 humans stood in the station's main corridor, empty-handed and apparently defenseless. Zekai's confidence swelled. This would be over quickly. The first human to move was Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist who barely reached 5.5 feet in height. When a Veltar warrior approached her, crystalline blade extended, she did something that froze every alien observer in place. She grabbed the blade. Her bare hand closed around the razor-sharp crystal, and blood immediately began to flow. But instead of crying out or releasing her grip, Dr. Chen yanked hard, pulling the surprised warrior off balance. Her other hand shot forward, fingers extended, striking the creature's optical cluster with surgical precision. The warrior stumbled backward, temporarily blinded. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The humans moved like a pack predator suddenly unleashed. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, a bear of a man with arms like tree trunks, grabbed a Veltar warrior by what passed for its neck and simply squeezed. The crystalline being's internal structure couldn't withstand the pressure, and it shattered like an expensive vase. Navigation Officer Liu adapted her zero-gravity training to the confined space, using the station's walls to launch herself at the invaders with devastating effect. Her steel-toed boots, standard issue for technical personnel, proved surprisingly effective at cracking crystal armor. But it was Security Chief Rodriguez who truly demonstrated the human's adaptability. Finding himself surrounded by 3 Veltar, he grabbed a handful of metal shavings from a nearby workbench and flung them into the alien's optical sensors. While they flailed blindly, he systematically disabled each one using nothing but his knowledge of leverage, joint manipulation, and precise strikes to vulnerable points. Zekai watched in growing horror as his seemingly superior forces were systematically dismantled by creatures fighting with nothing but flesh, bone, and an inexplicable refusal to surrender. The humans used everything as weapons: the station's fixtures, debris, even their own bodies. They bit, clawed, headbutted, and performed maneuvers that seemed to defy both physics and common sense. Dr. Chen, still bleeding from her wounded hand, had managed to use a broken piece of her attacker's own blade to disable 2 more warriors. She fought with the cold efficiency of someone who had studied anatomy extensively and knew exactly where to strike. The turning point came when Maintenance Supervisor Kowalski, a wiry man in his 50s, demonstrated why humans had once been persistence hunters. A Veltar warrior, larger and stronger than any human present, tried to corner him near the station's reactor housing. Kowalski simply ran. Not away, but in circles around and around the reactor chamber, forcing the warrior to pursue him. After 15 minutes, the crystalline being was exhausted, its movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Kowalski, barely breathing hard, finally stopped running and delivered a simple push. The warrior toppled over, unable to right itself. "The thing about crystal," Kowalski explained to the fallen alien, "is that it's brittle when it's tired." Within an hour, the entire Veltar boarding party was either disabled or dead. The humans had taken casualties, several serious injuries and 1 fatality, but they had won. Without a single weapon beyond what nature had given them, Zekai found himself alone in the corridor, facing 30 blood-spattered humans who looked at him with the patient eyes of apex predators. His communication device crackled with desperate calls from his fleet, demanding a status report. You want to know the difference between us and you? Dr. Chen asked, wrapping her wounded hand with strips torn from her uniform. You evolved on a world where being sharp was enough. We evolved on a world where being clever, being tough, and never giving up were the only ways to survive. She gestured to her fellow humans. Every one of us is descended from creatures that hunted mammoth with pointed sticks, that sailed across unknown oceans in wooden boats, that looked at the sky and decided to go there. We didn't get to the stars because we could cut things. We got here because we refused to quit. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, his knuckles split but his bearing proud. You took our weapons thinking that would make us helpless. But you missed something important. Humans don't need weapons. We are weapons. We're just usually polite enough to use tools instead. The message that went out from Kepler Station that day reached every corner of the galaxy within a standard cycle. The Veltar Empire, along with several other species, began immediate diplomatic overtures with Earth. The video recordings of the battle became the most watched files in galactic history. In the end, it wasn't humanity's technology that earned them respect among the stars. It was the terrifying realization that even stripped of all their tools, reduced to nothing but flesh and determination, humans were still the most dangerous creatures in the known universe. The Galactic Council updated their files on humanity that day. Previous designation: tool-using species with moderate combat potential. New designation: approach with extreme caution. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Under no circumstances should you assume that disarming them makes them harmless. As Dr. Chen later wrote in her report to Earth Command, they thought taking our weapons would leave us defenseless. They didn't realize that evolution had already given us the only weapons we really need: a brain that never stops thinking, a body that refuses to quit, and the unshakable belief that there's always a way to win. The galaxy learned to fear humanity that day, not because they were cruel or aggressive, but because they were something far more dangerous, resourceful, adaptable, and absolutely, utterly unbreakable.